Doctors, what was the most annoying patient you've ever had? I'm a doctor. It's not a HIPAA violation to speak in broad, generic terms. I've had lots of annoying patients. The one that stands out in my mind was one back when I was in residency training. Pretty minor in the grand scheme of things, but still sticks in my mind for some reason. I was pulling call in the hospital, which as a resident meant that any time a patient showed up in the ER who was identified as being a patient, even remotely associated with one of our residency clinics, the ER docs wouldn't see them, but would instead have the nurse page the on-call resident. Anyway, most nights on call meant 0 sleep, as you would get called to the ER all the time, in addition to your other duties, which by themselves would typically keep you from ever getting enough downtime to catch a few Z's. Well, this one night, the stars were aligned. After a brutal first few hours of call, things quieted down, and finally, at about 2 a.m., I managed to take off my shoes and to lay down, and I actually fell asleep. It was blissful. At that point, I had been working full throttle for probably 30 plus hours, so I was in heaven. Then at about 2:10 a.m., the pager goes off and displays the ER number. I call the ER nurse who tells me I have a patient in the ER, so I get up, rub the sleep out of my eyes, put on my shoes, etc., and groggily make my way to the ER. I grab the chart and go into the exam room. Conversation basically goes like this. Hi, I'm Dr. blah blah blah. What brings you into the emergency room tonight? Patient. I can't fall asleep tonight. After extensive questioning, that was it. Her medical emergency, which required her to rush to the ER at 2 in the morning and wake my butt up from blissful slumber, was that she couldn't fall asleep that evening. Next story. Doctor here. My grandmother, by far, and I'll risk HIPAA on this one. While I was doing rotations, I worked in the ER. My grandmother would come to the emergency room with any little ailment, including the hiccups on one occasion. I explained to her that she needed to go to her normal GP for those kinds of things. The following week, back in the ER. The medical emergency, that was a runny nose. Look, Grandma, I get wanting to see your family. That's sweet, that's nice. There must be a better way, though. Next story. I'm a medical student, not a doctor, so I haven't seen all too many patients yet, but something happened recently that definitely stuck out. I was volunteering at a community health fair, screening people for head and neck cancer. A conversation with one of my patients went something like this. Hello, ma'am, my name is Dr. blah blah blah, and I'll be doing your screening today. I noticed on the form you filled out that you've been smoking for the last 30 years. Are you aware that can increase your risk for head and neck cancer? The woman glares at me and says, Are you judging me? No, I just wanted to. Don't tell me what I should or shouldn't do. I like doing it, and ain't nothing some Asian doctor says is gonna make me stop. Okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure you understood the risks. And I proceed to the head and neck exam. I know what you're looking for. You're looking for AIDS, aren't you? Yeah, I know that AIDS makes you get bumps on your neck. Just 'cause I'm black, you think you're gonna find AIDS? No, ma'am. This is a head and neck cancer screening. I'm checking your neck for cancer. When she gets up after we're finished, I smile and tell her to have a nice day. She doesn't even look at me, and instead goes straight to the lady staffing our front table and says, You need some good black doctors that understand the black condition, not some Asians. At this point, I'm not really offended or angry. I'm just incredulous. What does that even mean? Next story. Pediatrician here. Without a doubt, the vaccine activist moms are my biggest headache. I honestly don't know why they come to me in the first place. Vaccines are the cornerstone of modern pediatrics. The stay-at-home moms are the worst. Sometimes I swear they come into the office for the sole purpose of instigating an argument with me. So without a doubt, some people do go looking for those arguments. I want to know what they think the argument is going to lead to. Do they think they're going to change your mind and bypass your years of medical training, and you'll just be like, oh, that's a really good point? Or what? What's the goal here? Next story. Not sure if this is what you're looking for since I'm not a doctor, but a friend is, and this is a semi-funny story. He's an anesthesiologist. One night he's working in the ER when a guy came in with multiple stab wounds and gunshot wounds. He had tattoos everywhere. Nothing wrong with tattoos, but they said a bunch of things like white power and a bunch of racist and anti-Semitic bullcrap. He also had a swastika on his forehead, kinda like Charles Manson, I guess. My doctor friend is Jewish, so as he's putting the mask on to knock the guy out for surgery, he says, Nice tattoo. My name is Dr. blah blah blah, and I'm your Jewish anesthesiologist. Tattoo guy apparently looked pretty terrified. He survived though. Next story. Both my mother and grandfather mostly complain about patients who get seen for their appointment, then literally run out to avoid paying. These people usually end up wanting to be seen again down the road and get exceptionally upset when they're asked to pay up front if they agree to see them at all. Or patients who don't finish a round of antibiotics because they were feeling better after a few pills, then come back in complaining they're still sick. These people often save those leftover pills to give to other people when they get sick or to take when they get sick again. And we wonder why we have antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Or patients who refuse to take their medicine as directed at all and or ignore simple instructions for what to do to make them healthier. If you're, say, diabetic, and your doctor says to lay off the sugary soda, well, it's probably best to listen. Switch to diet. Don't pout like a baby. If you've already had a heart attack and your doctor's prescribing you medicine to keep it from happening again, take the goddamn medicine like you're supposed to. And patients who lie to them. Lying gets neither you nor the doctor anywhere. It wastes both of your time. It might even steer the doctor in the wrong direction, causing them to send you for tests you don't need or misdiagnose you. Edit. Thought of another since we're talking about antibiotics a lot now. Patients who insist they need antibiotics when they really don't and continue to insist they need them after the doctor has explained why they're unnecessary. Unfortunately, a good chunk of the time doctors will go ahead and prescribe them to put the patient at ease because they're not totally sure or to be extra careful for legal reasons. The sheer amount of antibiotics being prescribed nowadays is actually a bigger contributor to antibiotic-resistant bacteria nowadays than people not taking them correctly. Please, when at all possible, let your immune system fight off the illness itself without the help of antibiotics. Next story. Emerge doc. I have annoying patients in the ED all the time. Opiate seekers, people with alternative sandwich motives, HODers given too much Narcan by medics, mothers who feel entitled. The list goes on and on and on. Patient missed his GI appointment to come to the ER for complaints about his abdominal pain. Another patient when discharging asked for 2 or 3 cab vouchers, one to go home, then the others to use to go and come back from his doctor's appointment the next day. And the 15 out of 10 pain people who are calm eating a sandwich. Even after I explained to them that a 10 out of 10 is being lit on fire with both arms being sawn off, that their pain couldn't get worse even if they were to be stabbed and shot and beaten up, and after all that say, it's a 15 out of 10. Next story. I had this guy once with severe congestive heart failure. We were doing everything possible in the cardiac ICU to keep him alive. We kept trying to have discussions with him about advanced directives, what procedures we were going to do, consents for things. All he wanted to talk about was getting his Ensure supplement shakes. Me. Sir, in the event that you can't breathe on your own, would you like to be placed on a ventilator to breathe for you? Guy. Will I still be able to have my Ensure? No. Can I have one now? Next story. I'm not a doctor, but my wife was in the hospital for surgery and I was visiting. I would visit my wife pretty regularly, once in the morning to bring her breakfast and lunch, and once in the evening for dinner. She was only in the hospital for a few days, so it wasn't that bad. The lady she shared a room with was a large, obese, older white woman. Apparently, she had an anal fissure that was causing her a lot of pain. She also stank to high heavens. Like, I can't describe the kind of smells that came out of her. Anyway, the doctor came in one day while my wife was asleep and I was reading, and he said, "Okay, Miss Hadley," not her real name, "I need to take a look."
No, it hurts so much you can't look at it.
She then proceeded to throw her bedpan at him, which was clean, thank God. The doctor then came back with an orderly and a nurse. "Come on, roll over, let me take a look."
No, you already took my toe. I want the hydro cream.
At this point, the doctor sighed and left the room, I assumed to get the cream. The curtain was closed, so I couldn't see. He came back in and the nurse went and put some gloves on. I assumed she was going to be applying it. Then I heard the old woman moan as a ghastly smell emanated from her. My wife woke up at this point and asked, "What the hell was that?" I pointed and she closed her eyes and drew the blanket over her nose. I could hear the doctor, nurse, and orderly gag at the stench, and then the woman moaned again, but this time in pleasure. I could hear a schlick-schlack sound as the nurse applied the cream around her fissure. The woman, as she moaned, yelled,
"Get it all this time. You didn't get it all last time."
The doctor took a look and said, "Okay, that's enough, and hurried out of the room. The nurse peeked out from behind the curtain and saw me and my wife holding blankets up to our noses to try to filter the stench. She mouthed the word sorry, and we were moved to a different room about an hour later. The new roommate was a sweet elderly black woman who was getting foot surgery. Next story. I'm not a doctor, but when I was in a hospital recently, I was in a bed next to an old chap who didn't have a great deal going on upstairs. Anyway, one night I woke up and he was stood by my bed staring out the window. The next night he woke me by grabbing my leg, thinking it was his walking stick. The real annoying moment was when he was looking for his walking stick again and decided that it was my indwelling catheter, so he grabbed the tube hanging off the bed and tried to walk away with it. Okay, I don't know what an indwelling catheter is, but from what I know about catheters in general, that doesn't sound very fun, OP. That sounds expressly like a bad time. I am so sorry. Next story. I felt like a jerk the last time I went into the quick clinic and I said, I looked up my symptoms on WebMD and I'm sure you hear this all the time, but I think I have strep throat, an ear infection, and a sinus infection. Sure enough, I did. But I bet internet self-diagnosis gets pretty annoying. Usually when I get on WebMD for something minor, I'm convinced I'm dying of cancer and AIDS. Next story. I'm a GP in the UK. Most of the annoying stuff in the A&E/ER. I must give a special mention to anyone that has taken ecstasy. I had a young lad of about 16, hyper, sweating and chewing his own face off. Would he freaking sit still? No. So we flattened him with benzos and gave him a crapload of IV fluids. I put in a urinary catheter, attached the bag to the bed, and leave him on the monitor in the resuscitation area. I go off and see a few other cases, and about half an hour later I see out of the corner of my eye, he's walking the corridors with his wee pink bum showing at the back in the hospital gown. Thing is, the catheter's still in and he's dragging his own bed around him by his Johnson, completely oblivious. And then there was the guy who tried to reverse his own vasectomy. Next story. Not really annoying, but my mom, radiologist, said that she had seen a lot of weird crap on x-rays, but this one takes the cake. Apparently, this is a decently common thing. People who get gastric bypass surgery are put on an extremely restricted diet because if they eat like they normally did pre-surgery, the staples holding their now tiny stomach would burst open and could end them. From time to time, she will see whole donuts and other food come up on images near the patient's stomach. She then has to call the nurses and tell them that the patient is hiding food under their rolls of fat and skin. TLDR, people hide food in their fat rolls after gastric bypass surgery. Next story. I work in a cancer treatment facility, an off-site to the main hospital dedicated to screening and treating cancer only. I have a drunk Mexican dude that comes in every Monday with something wrong. If it's not a bloodied hand, it's a bloodied nose or a missing tooth. I can't tell him enough that we aren't the ER. A woman in her late 40s comes in with her mother on a weekly basis. Every week she tries to steal lunches from the volunteers, then calls me racist, I'm West Indian, for not letting her take it. Okay, I'm sorry you can't reach into your LV bag for $1 and buy something at the vending machine. Instead, let me give you the only thing we offer the people that slave here for free. Hasidic Jewish women are mean, very mean. I have yet to meet one that speaks to me like a human being. I'm not generalizing. I've been keeping count since 2008, and I get it's a rule of your religion and we have sensitivity training to deal with this, but how am I expected to know where your wife is if you won't speak to me? At Hasidic men. Older Arab man comes in with his wife and daughter. Please stop leering at me. I don't need to cover my hair. I don't need to wear what your wife wears. If my cleavage bothers you so much, then stop looking at it. I swear that man must have a love-hate relationship with himself. I'm not crazy, right? OP is talking way too much in terms of race. Now, I'm not going to make the rash judgment that they're racist, but I do think OP should, reconsider how they frame certain things and events in their lives. Like, I don't really see why we can't just talk about these people as annoying individuals as opposed to, annoying whatever race they are. Like, come on, man. I was thinking of cutting this one out, but I wanted to leave it in just so I could say this to OP. Check yourself, brother. Next story. Secondhand story. Told to me by a real doctor. He was a GI surgical resident and on call for the night. They had a patient, I'm going to call her Betty since I have no idea what her real name was, that was somewhat well known to the staff. She was a drug abuser and would frequently end up in the hospital for self-injuries, attempts at taking her own life, stuff like that. Her attempts were most likely attention-seeking. I don't know why she wasn't institutionalized. Anyway, it's 1 a.m. and she comes in having called the paramedics after taking, quote, about 40 to 50 pills, but she wouldn't tell anyone what medication it was. The ED physicians weren't even sure she had taken anything, but pumped her stomach anyway. They found a couple of pills, but nothing indicative of an OD, and she seemed stable, so they thought it was fine. They told her they would watch her for another few hours and would discharge her by 6 a.m. At 3 a.m., the doctor gets paged to GI surgery. Apparently, Betty had managed to get out of the restraints. Again, she was considered wanting to take her own life, and swallowed multiple uncapped syringe needles and razor blades that were in her room. An x-ray showed multiple perforations of her stomach and small intestine. The needles have a sharp end and a plastic bit on the other end, so they generally just got stuck poking out of the gut wall like a reverse pincushion. They get into surgery and the doc starts working with another surgical resident to remove all of the foreign objects and try to prevent laceration of nearby organs. They succeed, think they've located everything, but weren't sure of the count. Rather than obtain a second x-ray, the other surgical resident decides to massage the intestine, all 26 feet, and try to locate any additional needles/razor blades. It turns out they missed a razor blade. As the resident massaged the part of the intestine with the razor blade, it sliced through the intestine and deeply lacerated 3 of his fingers. He obviously had to excuse himself to go to the ED himself, and the doc was left to repair the intestine, try to prevent infection, always a risk when the gut lumen is exposed to the abdominal cavity, and close. I think he might have called a more experienced surgeon at this point. All in all, the patient survived and was discharged a day later. The doctor was mad, and ended up pursuing his goal of becoming a liver transplant specialist even more fervently. The other resident was also fine, if a bit injured, but there was a lot of concern at the time about him having contracted HIV or Hep C from this patient. Next story. My mum is a doctor, and she once had this patient who was mentally ill, and he decided he was in love with her, and that they would be together one day. He started following her, and also me and my siblings, to school and various clubs that we went to. I was about 8 at this point. My mum got a restraining order against him, but as his last act of vengeance, he stole our dog. Not entirely sure whether this counts as annoying rather than horribly distressing. Next story. It's a tie. A. Prisoner who would repeatedly swallow taped-up razor blades to get out of prison and complain of intense uncontrollable pain. He was allergic to codeine, morphine, fentanyl, Darvocet, hydrocodone, Percocet, but not IV Dilaudid. That crap worked great. There are actually lots of guys like him, but he was particularly persistent and would harass and threaten the staff, in addition to being a jerk in numerous other ways, but he had the system figured out. B. Also annoying was a woman who was faking a shoulder injury to get benefits/disability. Again, she's by no means unique, but she was really bad at faking it. Like, offensively bad. She would also shop multiple doctors for pain medication, be abusive to staff, and constantly threaten to sue people. She was eventually busted for fraud. She stopped showing up at least. Next story. My dad is an anesthesiologist. While prepping a man to start an IV, the man said, "You'd better put it in right the first time or I've got a fist right here for you." My dad, a martial artist, looked him in the eyes and said, "Well, I've got 2 of them." The man shut up and let my dad do his job. Next story. Patients with family members who are in the medical field.
My sister is a nurse.
Look, I respect that your sister is a nurse and you know a lot. I'll give you that. But you are not an ENT or AUD. My diagnosis and their diagnosis says that Grandpa taking 600 milligrams of NSAIDs a day is most likely damaging his hearing. Just because you haven't heard of it doesn't mean it's not a listed side effect. I'm not a doctor. I'm a hearing instrument specialist. I test hearing and dispense hearing aids. I catch lots of missed diagnoses and hearing troubles. Next story. I'm not a doctor, like everyone else here apparently, but I do work at a hospital, and I hate dealing with patients who are senile and angry. Patients who complain about getting their breakfast at 10 a.m. when it's still 8 a.m. Patients who complain that this crappy hospital can't provide working phones when they're trying to dial out on their TV remote, etc. It's annoying, though I know the patients can't help it, because I want to help them with their problems, but the problems don't exist. Next story. Not the most annoying, but the most funny or adorable. When I was a medical student sitting in with an ophthalmologist, he had this adorable old demented 80-ish-year-old duck whose short-term memory was about as long as a goldfish's. He was trying to examine the back of her eyes using an ophthalmoscope, which means that you have to put your face literally centimeters away from the patient's face. Every time he would go in for a look, the old demented lady would think he was coming in for a kiss and smack a big fat one on his lips. Happened about 3 times. I love my job. Next story. I'm gonna be that guy, sorry. I'm not a doctor, but my ex-wife. She was in the hospital/doctor's office constantly. She managed to get referred to a pain specialist doctor at one point who prescribed her oxy and methadone. She constantly complained and threatened to sue the doctors to their faces. One year, she threatened a hospital with this on Christmas Day so they would write her a prescription. I spent well over $14,000 in medical bills that year. I'm so glad she's my ex-wife now. It took me years to dig myself out of tens of thousands of dollars of debt she left me with. OP, I'll give you this one. This definitely sounds like an annoying patient even though you're not a doctor. I am also glad she's your ex-wife now, and I'm also glad you're out of debt. Great work, OP. Keep it on the up and up. Next story. After reading some of these posts, I really wonder if we should just let some of these people die. It is such a waste of resources to keep someone alive who is so blatantly and perpetually ignoring everything all doctors tell them. Like the one comment that says, "Paramedic, we have a local idiot diabetic who has had to have us come to his house 11 times in the past month because he gets drunk, wakes up in the morning, takes his insulin, then passes out again without eating anything so his blood sugar drops. He's called around 50 times over the last 3 years. Seriously, I know my comment sounds harsh and uncalled for, but imagine hearing a story like that, and then imagine someone else dying for legitimate reasons outside of idiocy because the paramedics were tied up with this idiot. Or just the fact that expenses for the legitimate patients is so much higher because of the same jerk. I want it to be very clear that was not a narrator's comment. Just gotta really make sure you know I did not say that. It is not representative of what the channel believes or anything. In some aspect, I do get what OP is saying, but also, yeesh. OP, you're right, it does sound a bit harsh. Next story. I could fill an entire thread with annoying patient stories, but I'll stick to the latest one. I was treating the mother, but she had 3 young kids with her. They were out of control, opening cabinets, trying to go out into the hallway, yelling, banging stuff around. The nurse told her repeatedly to control her kids, but the woman couldn't make them behave. I went in to treat her, and the youngest one, 3 or so, bit my ankle with astonishing force. It hurt like hell. I told her to reschedule when she could find a sitter and went back to my office. When I looked at my ankle, there was a perfect circle of tiny teeth marks on it. Freaking vampire child. Next story. Still a student, but once we had this very, very drunk guy that had been hit by a motorcycle. He had an exposed fracture on the leg. The bone was literally showing. We had to reaccommodate the bone, and to do so, the doctor and another student had to literally pull his leg so they could make the bones match like pieces of a puzzle. And the rest of us had to make weight so the patient wouldn't fall off the bed. So there we were. And did I mention the patient was really drunk? So this guy starts pushing my shoulder saying, "Let me go, stop it, it hurts." At one point he actually said, "Just give me an aspirin and I'll walk out of here." It was really difficult to convince him we needed to help him and that no, he could not walk on his own right now. Next story. This was more funny than annoying. It happened while my sister was in the ER. While my sister is waiting to be seen, this woman is yelling in another curtained area. Note, we can't see her. She keeps yelling,
Don't touch me. God damn you. God damn you. She's sticking me.
This goes on for about 10 to 15 minutes at random times. I assume the nurses were making new attempts to check the woman. My sister and I are biting our hands and arms to keep from laughing out loud. Finally, a nurse comes in to take my sister's vitals and get her own treatment started. My sister jokes with her and says, "At least I'm not screaming like that other woman." The nurse looks at her and says jokingly, "We haven't even touched her. We can't even take her blood pressure." It was all quite funny and a little bit sad. Next story. Not an actual doctor, but I see a fair share of patients while stuck isolated with them for long periods of time. Number one problem, old racist patients. You pretend you don't understand my Spanish, use racial slurs you think I don't know to the translator and refuse treatment because you don't want a gringo to touch you? Fine. You want to treat me like crap and make my life hell? I can't stop you. Also, flatulence. I let it slide usually, but please don't let loose like you're proud of it. Next story. I have to have heart surgery every 8 years and had to have 2 other surgeries this year alone. I also delivered my baby in a hospital. Anyway, right before I had the catheter inserted, I told the surgical assistant I needed to pee. She said for me to go. They had something to clean it up, I guess. Instead of peeing into what they expected, I peed all over her. I was a bit out of it, fairly certain they'd started anesthesia by this point, and at the time it seemed totally reasonable. Next story. My uncle's favorite story from working as an emergency doctor. Middle of the night, a man gets rushed in roaring drunk with a breathing obstruction. Upon examining the guy, Dr. Uncle finds a whole live fish lodged in his throat. Apparently he'd been fishing, caught one, and wanted to kiss it before he threw it back. However, being drunk as a skunk, he somehow managed to swallow the fish, who got rather upset at this treatment and flexed all of his spines. Poor fish had to be pulled out in pieces. Next story. The problem is that a majority of these people will never be happy with the result and will keep coming in expecting impossible outcomes while also disregarding all of the doctor's instructions. Situations like this are very common, unfortunately, here. I hate my job. Next story. I'm a nurse. I have a favorite annoying patient. He's mentally disabled. His girlfriend is also mentally disabled and drives him in. Conversations go like, "You're gonna test my throat?" "Yes." "This will know if I have an infection?" "Yes." "This test is going to tell me if I have strep in 15 minutes." "Yes." "Do I have an infection?" "That's what we're trying to find out." "Will it be ready in 15... God damn it, Mr. F, just wait here, I'll be right back. Next story. I was at the hospital getting an NST, checks fetal heart rate, and was in a ward room with 3 other beds. The lady across from me was freaking out because it was the first time she was there having an NST, and when the doctor came in to assure her that everything was fine, the lady started in with,
"Well, I read on the internet."
The doctor interrupted her and said, "Oh, really? And what did the internet have to say?" Next story. I'm a med student who sees patients in clinic, and one guy upset me the most for something simple. My anger is that he wasted my time to tell me he wasn't interested in caring for himself. That's fine by me. If you don't want what we offer, I hold no grudges. But this jerk just sat there, no less than 1 week after an artery in his brain blew up and tried to end him, and made the clinic fit him in and made me, through tuition and taxes, pay to look at him dumbfounded and question why the hell he was even there. Next story. My stepdad basically got kicked out of a hospital for being a horrible patient. He dropped a solid concrete umbrella stand thing on his foot, and of course he had fractures. The hospital was going to do surgery, but my stepdad simply refused to do what the doctors told him. You know, stay off his foot. He's a smoker, so he kept trying to go outside. They discharged him and gave him a foot brace. My mom was mad and had absolutely no sympathy for him at that point. Over 2 years later, and he still has foot issues, and from time to time, still needs the brace. Next story. Once I had a patient that would loudly complain about other patients in the lobby and make everyone uncomfortable. When someone would ask her to quiet down, she would get even louder and storm out. She said she hated our practice and whatnot, yet would continue to come back. In my experience, this is actually quite common. I mean, people are fully allowed to hate something and still have to use it, but like, causing a big, fuss in the middle of a bunch of other people who also probably don't even want to be there. Probably not the play. Next story. Sitting in the waiting room of a clinic now with my partner and listening to a woman giving a lecture on her late father's colon cancer that is attached to the liver. This was not before, of course, she gave the waiting room a good hose down in Lysol. We're at the stage now where her father voluntarily goes off of chemo. I'm positively on the edge of my seat of excitement. I sure hope my partner's doctor doesn't turn up to take me away from this potential lifetime movie. I don't really know what Opie said in this one, really. My understanding of it is the woman is just lecturing the waiting room about colon cancer? I mean, I guess. I feel sorry for her, but also, I would not want to be in that waiting room. Anyway, you probably noticed my voice sounds a little different for the last few stories. That's because this was last recorded in July. It's now October. Something was all messed up with the script. Things were cut out and whatever. It's fixed now. That's why I'm back. Anyway, last story for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.